In this channel, we do talk about the 1971 war, both on the Western and on the Eastern Front. So, as you are an expert on this matter, I really wanted to talk to you about this specific battle where our Indian armed forces and alongside with the Mukti Bahini did exceptionally well and had gathered, I guess, the second largest capture of POWs after the Second World War, I guess. Yes, or the largest, I think.
Yeah,
So it is actually very wonderful to talk about a historical moment like this. So, what are your thoughts regarding this war and this battle that made history?
thank you, Devaduti, for giving me the chance. First of all, I won't say myself an expert. I am just an defense aficionado who likes to learn a little bit about the Indian military and its history. Post World War II, post independence Indian military history to be exact.
Right.
Now, one thing about the 1971 war,
Hmm.
which I think is very important, is that considering modern times and the war that is raging on right now in Europe, which is the Ukraine war,
Right. Right.
you can kind of understand that the Indian military
Hmm.
and Bangladesh forces
Right.
both did a spectacular job in achieving their objectives
Hmm.
in 1971. We can look at modern day Russia and
Hmm.
how much they are struggling against the country of Ukraine,
Right.
and then we compare that to India in
Hmm.
1971, where they achieved a textbook blitzkrieg in 13 days.
Yeah. Right. 13 days, and before that, a few amount of operations here and there.
I
Um,
won't say those were part of the Blitzkrieg. Those were clandestine ops and
yes.
support to the local population. But the
Hmm.
main thrust of the attack happened after 3rd December, after Operation Chengiz Khan happened on West Pakistan border.
Right. Right.
So as someone who knows a little bit about Indian military history, I am not a very big expert on Bangladesh military history. To be frank, that's your forte. But
Hmm.
as someone who does study the Indian military history a bit, I find that a very spectacular performance that they achieved a total blitzkrieg with very few casualties in the span of only 13 days.
Right. Because I think India had an upper hand because not only because of the Mukti Bahini, but also because of the support of the local people. The local people, I mean, they gave their full heart to them. Like, you come forward, we will help you fight these Pakistani forces.
A great case in point,
Yeah.
there are stories of local people voluntarily cooking and providing shelter to the Indian forces in
Right.
Bangladesh.
Hmm.
And considering how quite horrible the Indian logistics was,
Yeah.
that that local support played a huge role. Furthermore, without local support, you are not winning any war in modern times. Look
Yeah.
at
Even
Russia.
having the superb logistics is not possible to win if the local support is not there.
Exactly. Look at modern day Russia, where they are going on Ukraine, but they don't have local support. Hence, their logistics is completely boggled down in mud. All while, even in Afghanistan, the
Hmm.
US forces did not have the support of the local population per se. especially in the rural Afghanistan. And at the end, they they didn't evade, I mean, evict the Taliban from those areas. Without local support, you are not doing anything.
Right.
Yeah. So uh, I think before we proceed, there was one uh, thing that we likely omitted. That is, who am I? Myself, Dipro Sikhar. I am just a defense enthusiast who has a little bit of knowledge about Indian military history,
Hmm.
as well as a particular emphasis on small arms. Now,
Okay.
what I really want to tell about 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War or Indo-Pak War or whatever you say is that this war is a very underrated war regarding regarding the international community and their knowledge of wars.
Absolutely.
And
That is
I
what I also find on social media and even outside India. Absolutely right.
yes, yes, I have seen. I am friends with multiple uh, American and other Western people, and I have been in contact with multiple experts in the whole war historians, and I have seen the trend that this war is not known to almost any of them, which I find rather disheartening. Because honestly, not because I'm Indian, but this is one of the best military campaigns in late 20th century.
Okay. It is,
And
even in India, what I find is like, it is confined only to the army cantonments and the garrisons. It is celebrated there. And in Bangladesh, to the local population, it is just a day of victory. And it's almost like forgotten. The only the older population remembers traces of it, and just some celebrations, and it's all gone. There is no proper record keeping, or I mean, compared to us, the Bangladeshis have done some recent improvements regarding some. I mean, what I can say is like keeping the memories alive. But in India, it's just it's just, I guess, compared as a military campaign. It's not celebrated that much within the local population compared to Bangladesh. But in Bangladesh, there's tons of politics regarding this war, so it's like still partially a taboo sort of thing. Of course, you might know this because of the things that happened to the country after 1975, but now it's like coming to the brighter side. It's sort of like going par with the liberation war that happened.
well, to be honest, this was Bangladesh's war.
Yeah,
We were we were fighting it on a on the military way, but for Bangladesh, it was a war of existence.
absolutely.
So it was an existential crisis for Bangladesh. So definitely they would put much heavier emphasis on that compared to us Indians.
Hmm.
So, Devaduti, one thing that I find very peculiar about this war, beforehand, I must say that I will discuss this war purely from the Indian armed forces perspective, because I don't know much about Bangladesh armed forces and what they did. So, regarding that, what I really find peculiar is that how impressively India used Russian weaponry in this war, Soviet weaponry,
Yes,
be it
absolutely.
55 tanks, BT
Soviet,
76
I mean,
tanks.
Soviet is the term. Soviet and
Yeah,
the Eastern Bloc weapons.
yeah,
That is,
Warsaw Pact weapons.
yeah,
So that's something that really blows my mind that how well India used things like the PT-76 tanks or the MiG-21s or the Su-7s.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, if you look at the trajectory of other wars where these weapons faced American-made weapons,
Mm-hmm.
they for most of the time has emerged on the losing side because those weapons were not on par with American equipment. However, India is probably the only exception where people armed with Russian weaponry or Soviet weaponry, whatever you call, actually prevent militarily over their American counterparts. I think that is a good demonstration on just how well trained Indian military forces were in this period. And to be honest, even today, that they could manage to achieve this.
Yes, it's after all the man behind the weapon.
Definitely, although it seems like the modern rhetoric kind of just forgets that sometimes because
Yes.
there's always the weapons fanboys more than the people fanboys. Like they just think the weapons are all. That is a modern trend in war historians,
Yeah, let me tell
which
you
I find
something.
disheartening.
Let me tell you something regarding 76 millimeter Yugoslavian artillery guns. So, regarding the 71 war itself, so the Indian Army's 56 Mountain Regiment had to cross the Brahmaputra River, and it was pretty big. This is in the Battle of Jamalpur. So these guys actually dismantled the guns and loaded them
Hmm.
up on country boats. You might have seen those boats. I mean, they transport people, and you need a rowman to row those boats. So these guns were dismantled, put up on these boats, and one by one, I think for some several parts, one boat was taken. Then for a set of other parts, another boat was taken, and in this way they transported artillery guns across the river, then towed them in the middle of the night for stealth, and then put them on position for firing. So just imagine the kind of, what I can say, pain you have to go through. You have to evade the enemy, you have to tackle the natural inhospitable terrain of Bangladesh, and then you have to fight. That's what the Indian military did, and they were like super determined, I guess.
Exactly. What India achieved in this war is nothing sort of spectacular, especially when you actually learn about the details on the situation of the armed forces back then. It was an heavily underfunded service. Let me tell you a story regarding this, at what Indian military did back then. This one is from the western side of the border.
Okay.
So, so many. This is not a story, but a general situation on the western border.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our Air Force pilots, remember, these are pilots, officers.
Mm-hmm.
They would often sleep under a tree with a, tarpaulin hung above them. They didn't even have their own quarters.
Right.
Uh, It was that underfunded. But for all that pain, the fighters, pilots, and the ground crews never once did any mistake with, misplacing the spares or those things or those
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. They were super professional in their job.
Right.
Our SU-7 fleets were achieving some 100% 100% application rates. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so all the planes were in fighting conditions. The 150 plus Su-7s which I had, which is very tough to do in war condition, especially when you are such a rather destitute country of 1971 India.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very poor country back then, but they
Yeah,
managed
even
to.
I heard that airfields had to be made right in the middle of the desert on the Western Front. even under the heavy bombings of the PAF.
Yeah, absolutely.
And most of the aircrafts that we lost in the Western Front, it was what I found is that it's mostly due to anti-aircraft firing. The PAF, I mean, I think they might have performed a bit better than how they did on the Eastern Front, but compared to the casualties we had due to the hands of the PAF, we lost more aircrafts just due to anti-aircraft firing.
Well, PAF couldn't stand a chance before IAF in that war. And to be honest, I won't blame PAF for that. Although some blame is also to them, but I will come back to that issue later. What I would say is that Indians were doing deep penetration strike missions,
Right,
and Pakistanis simply didn't have enough air assets to engage them on air-to-air combat. So our planes were coming more under fire from flak or the
right,
anti-aircraft. So definitely more were destroyed in that. However, one thing though, in many cases, what we did achieve to manage was to distract the PAF into fighting our planes, our fighters, whereas our bombers like the HF Maruts would go into uncontested airspace and just drop their ordnance.
right, right.
Yeah.
Even the same went with Canberras, I guess, electric Canberras. They performed well. Some of them were shot down. We have some pilots who are still missing in action, pilots of Canberra aircrafts. But yeah, fact is fact. Canberras did exceptionally well in 65 and also performed well in 71. I think they were the first aircrafts to have the 1,000 pound bombs with them. Yeah, 1,000 pound napalm. I think they had napalms as well. Some
Yeah, that
some were dropped on Tezgao, I mean on the eastern front in Dhaka and on the runway, and most I guess was used on the western front. I'm not much sure
yeah.
about it. So could you give me some idea about that?
No. See, Canberras did have napalms in them, but we actually stopped using them after first few days on the Eastern Front because there was a high chance of collateral damage using
Right,
napalm,
right, right,
and the Pakistani forces were using the local civilians as human shields. They would